are some keys in the English language that make us all a little more logical? And those keys are some words like you or I get paid today. That means either you or me. You and I get paid today. That means you and me get paid today. Neither you nor I get paid today. That means no one's getting paid today. And it's because we have those key words and, or, not, neither. Those key logical operators are what makes decisions easy to understand. And also, it's how we're going to learn to code in SQL today. So, get ready. Welcome back to day 4. My name is Crystal Bray. I will be your instructor on how to pull your own data and unblock yourself. Today we're doing SQL Logic, one of my favorite subjects because logic is an easy way for us to make better decisions, do faster analysis, and even start to tag some people based on our intuition or infuse some logic into the equation. And so we're going to do that today, and I hope you're going to be excited because day 4 is going to be a day you don't want to miss. We're going to discuss and, or, not. Those 3 words, and also a word called case. Kind of like an if-then statement. In the case and when this happens, then this. So we're going to do those kind of 4 key things, and, or, not, and then a case statement. Before we get started, I like to bring you over to this whiteboard to kind of give you a sense of what's happening. We're just taking the time to break it down so that when we get into SQL to code, you realize a lot of this can be done in pencil or paper or on a slideshow, and it's the same logic that's going to translate into our SQL code. So let's do and or not in our first case, and or not. And we're going to use these 2 individuals, Jane and John, and then an example of a car. Jane and John getting into a car, being in a car. And this is going to be a great way for you to visualize because you're going to be very intuitive and instinctive, and you're going to know all the answers. If I say Jane and John are in the car, who's in the car? Jane and John, right? They're both in the car. It's very clear. We know what that means, Jane and John. If I say Jane or John is in the car, what do I mean? Jane or John, but not both, right? I know that Jane or John is in the car. So we're kind of clear that one or the other is true, but not both. Now, this is an interesting case. What if I say not Jane or John? Sometimes we might say neither Jane nor John, but not Jane or John. What does that mean? No one's in the car, right? We know that because no one's in there. We just did logic operators in SQL, whether you know it or not, and we're going to use them in just a second. But I just want you to see that not Jane or John is very logical. It's a very logical approach. Okay, let's go over to the SQL real quick, and let's start to understand how we would use that in practice. So we're back in our handy dandy friend SQL Fiddle. As you remember, SQL Fiddle is our SQL emulator. It's going to allow us to do SQL without downloading anything in our computer, using a database that I have for you for free in the description. Before we get into SQL Fiddle, just a reminder, if you want to add your personal data or company data, please first review the legal policy, cookie policy, privacy policy, and at the bottom of their page, I would say don't put your personal data or company data if you don't want it to be open to anyone else. Okay, so SQL Fiddle, very useful, but for right now, it's really going to be how we're going to learn together. To remind you, this is our database for the course called PTO Coaching SQL Course Database. You have it in the description. Click the link and you're going to hit this page. We have a couple of custom tables for you that we've created for this course and lets you do everything we're going to talk about in this same window view. So we have a customers table, we have a salesperson's table, a products table, and an orders table. And we've gone over several times, but the schema or the ways these tables are set up, as you can see here, the order ID is a primary key or what the variables are, those are all easy to see because we can see the database while we're doing SQL. In real life, of course, you might need to either ask your data team for a schema or like a list of all the columns and what they kind of mean, or you might even just need to do a select star from the data table to kind of pull in some information. And don't forget to use limit functions, not to pull in too many rows. So we're going to start using the logical operators and, or, and not in this case. we want to use the AND operator. So we use the AND operator. And I want to retrieve a list of all customers where they're active and in the US. I want a list of all customers that are active and in the US. So to me, that sounds like the customers table, and we can go up and give ourselves a small refresher. Here's our customers table. We can see customer ID, name, country, status. So I want the country to be the US, the status to be active, and I might want the name of the customer. And you know what? Let's also grab the customer ID. And we can see there's some values inside of here. And the US is listed as US of A. Okay. So let's go down. And like you know, I like to build my tables backwards. So we're going to go customers as C, that alias as C. And in this case, let's do a select statement. I C.customer ID. Then I'm going to also pull in C.name as customer name. And then I'm going to also pull in C.country and then C.status, right? So country and status. Now, this is where we're going to use our logic condition. Do you remember the filter statement where? Do you remember our where filter statement? And this is like, let's say, where C.country is equal to USA, right? Remember that? And I can just execute this query here. And you can see that we have both John Doe and Jane Smith in the USA, but one's active and one's inactive. Well, what if I want the country and only those who are active? How would I add that in? Take a moment to think about it. Where would I put it? Hopefully you took a moment and you're going to put it in the where statement. This is an additional filter. So you can imagine if you're in Amazon and you want to sort by the price and location, price and prime shipping, you would do two filters instead of just one filter. We're doing an and statement. C.status is equal to active. Okay, and let's try that one. Okay, perfect. We see here that John Doe is the only individual, right, in the US that is active. So John Doe is in the US and active. So you just completed your first or maybe second or third logical operator in SQL. The AND operator in this case ensures that we get both conditions met. Remember, John and Jane are in the car. So the country is the US and they're active, and both are true. They have to be true in order for us to get that row retrieved. You can use this anytime you want to filter data and be very specific on what you want. This next example, we're going to filter with the OR operator. That's the OR operator. The objective here is to find all orders where the quantities are greater than 3 or the order value exceeds 1,000. And you're like, well, why would I want this? I might want to see if people are either buying a lot of, things in their basket or just spending a lot of money on one item, but I want to see that together. Like, I just want to see big spenders, big shoppers in one list. So let's do that. For this, let's think about the table we want. If I want all orders with a quantity is greater than 3 and the sales are greater than 1,000, well, I look right above here and I'm in the orders table. I have the order ID, so I can find the order itself. I have the quantity, and I also have the sales value. So I'm going to start backwards and do from the orders table as O. So I know my base table. And then I'm going to look for some columns. Let's say select O.order ID, because I want to know the order ID. I want to see the quantity, O.quantity. And then I want to see the sales, O.sales, right? And we can always add more columns to see them all if you want to have more information. Now, here comes the filtering. So we're going to do a where clause. I'm filtering on rows. So I'm going to use the where clause here, where O.quantity is what? It's greater than 3. And we can say greater than exclusive, which means just has to be more than 3. So it could be 4, 5, 6. Or I can say greater than or equal to 3, right? Which could be, let's say 3, 4 or 5 or 6 altogether. So let's say greater than or equal to 3. And then I want to know or if O.sales is greater than 1,000. And I'll just do greater than 1,000. So let's see what we find. Okay, great. We have our results. If we look down here, we got a couple of things. Order ID, quantity, and sales. Now, if we notice in the first order, the quantity is 2. And you're like, well, but we didn't want that. No, but look at the sales. The sales were almost 2,000. So it picked it out. Even though the quantity was 2, the sales were over 2,000, and that was enough. Look at the second row. You see here that the quantity is 4. But if you look at the sales, it's only 600. Right? So you can see that it pulled these rows, and technically either one is true or the other is true. So this is an or statement. What's great about an or statement, it can include records that meet either condition. And sometimes you might want to know if the salesperson is in the US or they're in the Netherlands, right? You can say this or that. And if either condition is true, it'll come up. In this case in particular, we can help identify large orders that are either large because of quantity or large because of revenue. In our next example, we're going to use the not operator. So we'll retrieve all products that are not in the electronics category. All products that are not in the electronics category. Okay, let's look at that. So I probably want the products table. Let's find it. Okay, product ID, name, category, price. I don't want anything in the electronics category. So let's do that from the products table as P. And then let's say we haven't done a star in a while. Select star. I want to get all the rows. Select star from P. For the where statement, we're going to do a throwback. Do you remember where we did lesson 1 way back when we can say P.category is in a list, right? We had this last time. You can say, let's say in electronics. And this will just make sure that the category is in electronics. So I can see the 3 things in electronics: laptop, smartphone, tablet. How would I do the opposite? I don't want anything in electronics. So what would I do? In this case, we're going to apply the not operator, but we're going to apply it in kind of inside not in. So let's say not in electronics. See what happens? Okay, there we go. This is not in. So you can say in and then not in, which makes logical sense. The not in this case is very useful because we can exclude specific categories. So you might want to do things like all the customers that are not in the US, right? Instead of listing all the other country names, you can just say just not in the US or not in the US and not in Canada, right? So not in, and then parentheses, USA, comma, Canada. That could be a not statement. And we can filter things down to focus on a specific product or focus on a segment of users or kind of sales categories itself. So the not statements are very good for like narrowing down information. Before we get into our next category, let's pop back over to the whiteboard. We're going to do a SQL Logic for the case statement. So I'm going to break this back up because this is slightly different. Let's say you have a logic with multiple conditions. You want to start assigning things like when sales are high, or when someone is in the US, they're in North America, right? And if they're in, let's say, Brazil, they're in South America, right? And so we might want to have these kind of statements. But so when something's happening, we want to be able to identify it in multiple conditions. We call this the case statement. We're going to use Jane and John for these case statement examples in a similar way that we did earlier. So in the case when, so the logic is in the case when Jane and John is in the car, then, so in the case when, then I can say the car is full, right? That makes sense. We saw that. Okay, the car is full. It's probably a 2-seater. In the case when Jane or John is in the car, I can say there's a seat available, right? We can add another person. What's the other case that we're leaving out? The car is full, there's 1 seat available, or the car is empty. So you can see this case statement has multiple conditions and or else. And sometimes this else is like a catch-all bucket. You might say an else other. And that's very useful in some cases. So you'll see that when you use SQL, the else clause. Well, this same case logic is what we're going to actually use to solve a couple more problems. Okay, so we're going to get into using the case logic itself. We're going to have one more objective to use the case logic. We're going to categorize sales based on high, medium, or low. We're going to categorize a sale that's based on high, medium, or low. And we're going to think about maybe high is like anytime a sale is greater than 1,500, or medium is anywhere between 500 and 1,500. And then else is just low, right? It's a catch-all, it's just low. We're going to take that and we're going to call this our sales category. So I'm thinking about sales. I'm probably thinking about the orders table. Is anyone even over 1,500? one person over 1,500. And we can see that right between 500, yep, and 1,500, great, and under. So we can kind of see here, but just reading the table makes it very hard to get a view of what the category would be in terms of sales count. I'm going to pull this from the orders table, and I'm going to use a select statement. And maybe I want to look at, let's just look at the order ID, and we'll look at the sales themselves. Sales. Then we're going to do a case statement. Case. This is going to be almost very similar to our whiteboard example. When sales, sales, greater than 1,500, then I categorize it as high. We can say when sales is between 500 and 1,500, then else low. Now, if you notice, we don't do an else then low. It's just else low. There's one more thing we have to do with a case statement. We have to close a case statement. So we're going to say, now let's end it. This is all in this. If you notice, there's only one comma here. This is all really one column that we're defining. And we're going to call this as an alias sales category. Okay? Let's try this out. Wow, that worked. Okay, great. You can see the order ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You can see the sales. And then now we have categories. This sells high, medium, medium, a low sell, medium, medium. This is super useful. Then I can go on, and as we'll see tomorrow, when looking at advanced forms of SQL, we can use this as, they're going to call it a common table expression. And we can say how many cells are in the high category, how many cells are medium. So stay tuned to see that on tomorrow's lesson on SQL Advanced, using things like common table expressions, things like the rank function and partitioning over the table called window functions. So very excited to get with you there. As you can see, even just here, the case statement actually lets you evaluate and return something that's pretty cool that you can predefine and label inside of SQL, right? This helps simplify complex logic within the query itself. And you can think of it as a way to infuse some of your know-how into the data. This is Crystal Bray with PTO Coaching. Do not forget to grab your SQL cheat sheet, your working guide. There's a link below. I know you're like, but Crystal, if I click on it, I have to put my email. Yes, because we want to talk to you. We want to know how you're feeling about this course. And in particular, we actually want to give you a resource guide that completely aligns with what you learned in these lessons. Okay, so we'll talk to you soon. Come back tomorrow. We're going to wrap it up with day 5. Day 5 on common table expressions, window functions. And you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And let me just say this. If anything, you just want to learn how to be able to read a SQL script. You may be not able to type it out yourself all the time, or at least the first time, but you'll be able to read it and know what's going on. And already that's a crucial key and unlock. Come on back for day 5. I'll see you tomorrow.